On January 25, 2018, Alpha Entertainment announced that they would be rolling out a modern reincarnation of the XFL, beginning with a 10-week inaugural season beginning in February of 2020. The league chose to focus on placing teams in large media markets, choosing 5 of the 7 biggest media markets in the U.S. All 8 XFL markets have over 2.9 million residents each, the smallest being St. Louis, which was likely chosen in response to the Rams' departure. This was clearly a deliberate strategy to capitalize on big markets' thirst for football, rather than targeting markets without existing NFL presences, which would replicate what other failed spring leagues of the past have tried. In addition to developing a very structured target marketing strategy, the XFL brass also implemented a very concrete tiered compensation structure for signing players, with the players' health insurance being covered by the league, unlike the first go-round. Teams will have 4 tiers of contracts to issue. Each franchise gets one Tier 1 spot for the franchise player designation. Those players will earn between $25,000 and $60,000 per game. There will be 3 Tier 2 slots, and those players will earn between $15,000 and $17,500 per game, followed by Tier 3, which has 23 players making between $6,000 and $10,000, and finally, the remaining 18 players are eligible for Tier 4 contracts, earning between $5,000 and $6,000 per game. For those of you who don't remember the blaze of glory that was the original XFL, the previous iteration of the XFL ran for just a lone season, 2001, as a joint venture between Vince McMahon of the WWF and NBC executive Dick Ebersol. It was launched as a competitor to the NFL, perhaps as a response to NBC recently losing its NFL broadcasting rights to CBS. The league was set to run in the late winter and early spring, after the Super Bowl, to capture the remaining public demand for football in the aftermath of the big game. The original XFL had several modifications to the traditional NFL rules, with the hopes of creating an entertaining product that leveraged both violence and sex appeal as part of the draw. The XFL's first slate of games got strong ratings, so much so that it did double the Nielsen ratings that the broadcasters had promised advertisers. However, the viewership eventually tanked. This was largely because there was just a lack of talent on the field, and many of the fans quickly grew tired of the league's gimmicky tactics. The XFL, which McMahon eventually conceded was a colossal failure, would fold at the end of its first season, costing both partners $35 million. While this reaction was more than understandable given McMahon's financial loss, the league was innovative in a number of ways. The impact that the XFL had on the way that sports are broadcast is undeniable. It introduced groundbreaking innovations in marketing and production that the NFL and other leagues and their broadcast partners now employ regularly. Aspects of the broadcast we all take for granted nowadays, like the sky cams or placing microphones on players or in-game interviews with players, all of that came from the marketing genius of Vince McMahon and Dick Ebersol. Unfortunately, because of the duo's miscalculation on how much the public would care about the quality of play, these innovations weren't enough to save the league. Everyone pretty much assumed that the XFL was dead and gone, a relic of football's past, like the many other defunct leagues that have taken their respective shots at recreating the NFL's magic. Even in the 2017 ESPN documentary, This Was the XFL, when McMahon openly commented on reviving the XFL, most of the general public scoffed at the notion of another football league trying to make a comeback. That was until Charlie Ebersol, the son of McMahon's former XFL partner Dick and the director of the XFL documentary, announced he would be launching the Alliance of American Football in March of 2018. It's rumored that Ebersol had originally approached McMahon about relaunching the XFL together, but the two were unable to reach an agreement regarding the league's trademark rights. Ebersol repeatedly offered $50 million for the trademark, but McMahon was not interested in the slightest. This caused Ebersol to splinter from the original project and go out on his own to create the AAF. The haste of his announcement was rivaled only by the league's careless financial structuring and product development. As a result, the AAF lasted less than a month before declaring bankruptcy. This opened the XFL's window to once again be the only off-season football game in town. Fast forward to today, and we are just a few short months away from the XFL rolling out its new and improved product. What should we expect from McMahon and his startup league? One thing seems to be certain: change. He even referenced this during the aforementioned 2017 documentary when he expounded on just how different they would have to market and operate the XFL in today's landscape. So the questions remain. How? How will it be different? Well, for starters, it's nearly impossible to have a conversation about football as a whole without acknowledging how differently the game is viewed in 2019. The last time the XFL aired, the NFL promoted its violence and glorified the gladiator mentality, a mentality that has all been but cast away with all that we've learned about concussions. So don't count on the XFL trying to promote a WWE style of football that promotes massive hits. It just isn't viable today. Public relations has also changed drastically, and so has the way that the XFL has been proactive in getting out in front of a number of issues that the NFL has struggled to deal with in recent years. McMahon came out with 2 pillars of the player conduct policy a full year before the league was going to launch. The league's position is that it discourages political gestures by the players during games, and anyone convicted of a felony is immediately disqualified from participation. McMahon justified his intentions by stating that the XFL would be, quote, evaluating a player based on many things, including the quality of human being they are, end quote, and that, quote, people don't want social and political issues coming into play when they are trying to be entertained, end quote. I think that McMahon and his cohort will benefit by the last chance mentality that so many of the XFL players will likely have, as many will still have NFL aspirations. I doubt these are the kind of guys willing to risk their paychecks at this point in their careers. McMahon has also put his money where his mouth is, so to speak, as he has been rather progressive on a couple of other issues. They decided to eliminate having cheerleaders, in part due to changing attitudes regarding women's participation in entertaining sports fans. This is a stark contrast to the lingerie-laden cheerleaders of the original XFL. Another big-time change between the XFL and the NFL is going to be the omission of all cannabis testing. Not only will the league not test for it, they aren't even barred from using it, regardless of what state they are in. This was a very strategic decision from McMahon, who has watched dozens of NFL players and vets speak out about their beliefs on the substance and how beneficial many of them have found it to be. Maybe the XFL will be able to push the NFL forward on this issue, like they previously did with their product innovations. Just maybe. In addition to the structural differences the XFL has from the NFL, there are also a lot of on-the-field variations that XFL fans will need to be on the lookout for. The XFL has actually continued to test out a number of different rules with community colleges in Mississippi, as well as with Your Call Football and the Spring League. So this is far from final, but here's a good first look at some of the impending rule changes. The XFL has tested the idea of treating all passes behind the line of scrimmage as lateral passes, therefore allowing more than one forward pass to be thrown on a single play. Commissioner Oliver Luck explained that the rule would also have the added benefit of simplifying the officiating process, because it allows the referees to more easily judge whether a player was behind a fixed line of scrimmage compared to whether a pass thrown by a moving player was traveling along a parallel line. It seems like a lot of the XFL's focus has been placed on revamping the officiating process and making it more efficient and consistent, primarily to try and increase the pace of play. That's why they are testing out ideas like adding a specialized ball judge to speed up the placement of the ball. While they are serious about adding some tempo to the product, they are not going to try and speed the game up at the cost of player safety. So you should still expect the XFL to follow the player safety trend that has swept through the NFL landscape, as officials will place a priority on fouls that pose a threat to player safety. There will, however, be much less emphasis on procedural violations to speed up the game by eliminating unnecessary penalty calls. If the foul isn't deemed a player safety threat, there is a proposal to implement a tap rule, which would send the transgressing player off of the field for one play in a free-flowing fashion, similar to the way that hockey does it. One key difference here, the team would not be subject to a man advantage like during a power play in hockey. Again, the focus here being to keep the game as fluid as possible. Another way they are trying to manage pace of play is through the most direct channel possible, the actual clock. Outside of the final 2 minutes of each half, the clock will run continuously, only stopping for a change of possession. Conversely, once play enters that final 2-minute period, the clock will stop after all plays from scrimmage. The hope being that this mitigates the effect clock management has on teams that are trying to orchestrate heroic late-game comebacks. Not only will the clock run continuously, but it will also feature a 25-second play clock, the shortest play clock in any U.S. football league. The original XFL, as well as the defunct AAF, used a 35-second clock, while the NFL and college football use 40-second play clocks. Some of the proposals around pace of play are even more progressive. The XFL has floated the idea of having a one-way radio placed into all of the offensive players' helmets to allow the offensive coordinators to run a completely automated no-huddle offense from the sidelines. This would largely eliminate the need for any huddling whatsoever. Additionally, the XFL is keen on limiting the effect that instant replay reviews have on the pace of the game, as they expect to limit them to 30 seconds in length. Outside of limiting the real-time length of the games, the XFL has also clearly placed a premium on creating compelling plays in areas that have become very redundant in the NFL. For example, the point-after-touchdown play. While the NFL has attempted to spice it up a bit by moving the kick back to a respectable distance, it is still undeniably one of the most boring plays you will ever see on a football field. 99% of the time, it feels like you see the exact same process and the exact same result. And the other 1% of the time, your team just gets viciously screwed over by an errant kick. Rather than deal with the repetitive madness that is the point after field goal, the XFL has replaced the scoring opportunity with a scrimmage play, similar to what the league implemented during the playoffs of its lone season. The play's point value will depend on how far the touchdown scoring team elects to take the snap from the goal line. A 2-yard attempt would score a single point, a 5-yard attempt 2 points, and a 10-yard attempt 3 points. All in all, it looks like the XFL has set out to modernize the game of football, and at this point, there is definitely some buzz about their upcoming season. Buzz that should skyrocket following the conclusion of the 2019 NFL season. The true test for the XFL will not be to generate buzz or excitement early on, but to create a product that has staying power, which has proven to be nearly impossible in the past. All I know is if anyone can do it, it's the brilliant marketer Vince McMahon. This guy seems like he has made it his life's mission to make the XFL sustainable, and it will be fun to see if he can finally do it the second time around. If you're new around here and you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to click the subscribe button down below. If you liked the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. If you have any ideas for cool videos, let us know down in the comment section. And last but not least, don't forget to tune into TPS every single day for more cool videos. We'll see you next time.